The wind whipped through the graveyard like an old ghost refusing to rest. Claire Whitmore stood alone, her black veil fluttering around her face, shielding her tears from the world. At 61, she had buried her husband, Robert, who had died suddenly from a heart attack in their quiet Boston townhouse. 35 years of marriage, gone in a single heartbeat. Before we dive into this gripping story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you love stories packed with mystery and drama, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. There's so much more coming your way. Claire's fingers trembled around the handle of the umbrella, though not from the cold. Something had been gnawing at her since the night she found the antique key in his desk drawer. A key he never told her about, a key wrapped in a crumbling envelope with a name that chilled her, Whitmore Estate, Devon, England. She hadn't stepped foot in England since she was a teenager. She had run from that place, from its silence and secrets, after her parents' fatal car crash and her grandmother's sudden withdrawal. But now the estate was hers. Robert's last letter, tucked in his journal, simply read, "Go back. It's time you knew everything." As the priest recited the final rites, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Robert's death wasn't just an accident. It was a trigger. A door opening to the past. The envelope arrived 2 days after the funeral, as if summoned by fate. Its yellowed parchment was sealed with deep red wax. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, her grandmother's. "Claire, dearest, if you are reading this, then the house is ready to speak again. Inside the drawing room stands the clock. You must wind it, but only at midnight. The truth has waited long enough. Love always, M.W." Claire read the letter twice. Her grandmother, Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, had died nearly 30 years ago. How could a letter arrive now? She contacted her lawyer. The reply was terse and strange. "The Whitmore estate is held in trust. Your grandmother's instructions required the key be delivered upon the death of your husband. You are the last surviving heir. The property is yours." Claire packed her bags the next morning. The cab ride from the Exeter station took her through winding country roads lined with hedges and ancient trees. Then she saw it, the Whitmore estate, perched like a slumbering beast on the cliffs overlooking the sea. Time had not been kind. Ivy strangled the stone walls, and the windows stared back at her like hollow eyes. Yet the moment Claire stepped inside, the air changed. Dust danced in beams of afternoon light, but the furniture was intact. The scent of lavender and cedar lingered faintly, her grandmother's favorite. And in the drawing room stood the grandfather clock. 7 feet tall. Bookwood. Roman numerals etched in brass. The pendulum still. That night, Claire stood in the drawing room. At exactly midnight she wound the clock. The gears groaned, the pendulum stirred, and then, dong. It chimed once, a deep and resonant note that echoed through the empty house. And then the chime was followed by something else, a soft creak from upstairs. Claire didn't sleep that night. Not really. She sat in the drawing room, sipping tea, the clock ticking now with unnerving regularity. Each hour struck like a whisper from the past. At dawn, she walked upstairs to the east wing, once locked, now mysteriously ajar. Dust covered the hallways, but a single set of footprints marked the floor. They weren't hers. In the nursery, she found the first object out of place, a photo of her mother holding a baby. But not Claire. The child was older, maybe 5 or 6, and wearing a necklace shaped like a timepiece. There was no record of Claire ever having a sibling. She searched the drawers. Behind a false panel in the wardrobe, she found a notebook, "The Children We Couldn't Keep." Her grandmother had written it. Later that day, the housekeeper, an elderly woman named Maud who still lived in the gardener's cottage, returned to greet Claire. "I never thought I'd see another Whitmore step into this house," she whispered. "And certainly not you." Maud walked Claire to the old rose garden behind the estate. It was overgrown but not dead. Someone had been tending it. Beneath each rose bush was a stone marker. Names carved gently into marble. Claire knelt beside one, Lillian, 1943. Another, Grace, 1944. And then, C, 1964? She pointed to the last one. "Who is this?" Claire asked. Maud's lips thinned. "That's the child your grandmother raised in secret. She vanished in 1981. No one ever found her. Claire's hands trembled. 1981, the year Claire left England. Claire stood in the main hallway, staring at the grand portrait of her grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore. It hung above the fireplace like a royal decree. But something about it was off. Eleanor's eyes had been scratched out, not painted over. A cold shiver ran down Claire's spine. Had someone tried to erase her grandmother's watchful gaze? What? She climbed the servants' stairs to the attic, where generations of Whitmores had stored their secrets. There she found stacks of old paintings and boxes marked Estate Donations, 1970s. Beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets was another painting, one that chilled her blood. It was a family portrait, Eleanor, Claire's mother, and another girl, about Claire's age. Same pale hair, same chin. But this girl wore a locket in the shape of a clock. Claire flipped the canvas. On the back was a name, Claire II. In town, Claire sought answers at the old church archives. Father Marin, a clergyman with eyes like a crow, offered her tea but little information. "You Whitmores bring storms when you return," he muttered. The sins of this family, well, they were buried deep. And not all graves lie still. Later, in the cafe, she was approached by a stranger, a middle-aged American woman with a scarf knotted tightly under her chin. "You're Claire, aren't you? The original?" Claire blinked. "Excuse me? I knew your grandmother. I stayed here a long time ago." The woman leaned closer. "Be careful with that house. That clock doesn't just tell time, it holds it." Then she stood and left without finishing her tea. Maud returned that evening. She found Claire in the library, surrounded by books and wine-stained family records. "Maud?" Claire asked. "Was there another Claire?" "A second one." Maud sighed. "Your grandmother never recovered after the war. So many of her friends died, so many secrets buried. When your mother died, Ellen, she believed time could be reversed, that people could be replaced." Claire stared. "Replaced?" Maud leaned close. "She adopted a child and gave her your name. She believed if she could raise her right, she could fix the past." "What happened to her?" Claire asked. Maud hesitated. "She went missing. But some say the house took her back." A trunk hidden in the cellar revealed old letters, love letters. Passionate, urgent, dangerous. Not from Claire's grandfather. They were addressed to Eleanor from a soldier stationed in France, Captain Theodore Marsh. The letters revealed a second life Eleanor had led during the war. One line in particular made Claire gasp. "I left the timepiece under the nursery floorboards. Keep her safe. Our daughter must never know who she really is." Claire ran to the nursery, pulled up the cracked wooden floor. Beneath it was a velvet pouch. Inside, a delicate golden pendant in the shape of a miniature clock. When she touched it, the grandfather clock downstairs chimed. But it wasn't midnight. Claire followed the chime down to the study. The floor trembled beneath her feet, and a gust of wind blew open the French doors. Then she heard it, a soft groaning behind the bookshelf. The clock ticked louder. She pushed aside the bookcase and discovered a trapdoor. With trembling hands, she opened it and descended into darkness. A tunnel stretched beneath the estate, carved from stone and earth. Lanterns hung cold on the walls, but when Claire passed by, some flickered, as if touched by a breeze that wasn't there. At the end of the tunnel, she found a chamber. And in the chamber, a child's room. Pristine. Untouched. With a rocking chair that moved slowly back and forth, though no one sat in it. On the dresser sat a nameplate. Claire II, returned 1981. Claire stepped back. And then, from the shadows, a child's voice whispered, "Why did you leave me?" Claire stumbled backward from the ghostly whisper in the underground nursery. Her breath came in shallow gasps. Nothing had prepared her for the icy dread crawling over her skin. She turned to flee, but her foot struck something metal on the floor, a child's wristwatch. When she picked it up, it ticked once, then stopped. She flipped it over. The back was engraved. "For my Claire, love mum." It wasn't hers. Claire wore a medical bracelet growing up. She had never owned a watch. But the handwriting on the engraving, it matched her mother's. Exactly. She stared at the chamber's walls. scrawled across them in faint chalk. Time belongs to those who listen. That night, just before midnight, Claire sat in the drawing room again, staring at the grandfather clock. Her nerves were frayed, and her thoughts tangled like ivy across old bricks. The clock struck 12. The second chime never came. Instead, the front door creaked open. Claire crept into the hallway. A figure stood in the entryway, a woman in a long black coat, dripping wet from the rain, her face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "I'm here for what's mine," she said softly. Claire stepped forward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" The woman looked up. She had Claire's face, but younger, colder, and her eyes were not human. The next morning, Claire walked into town, desperate for answers. She found the oldest resident, a reclusive widow named Agnes who lived near the edge of the cliffs. "You've seen her, haven't you?" Agnes asked, peering through cataract-clouded eyes. "The second Claire." Claire nodded. Agnes touched a small silver charm around her neck. "Your grandmother never forgave herself. She wanted to protect her legacy. When the child grew older and began to remember, Eleanor took drastic steps." "What did she do?" Claire asked. Agnes hesitated. "The girl ran away, but she came back, different. The clock had chosen her. And when your parents died, your grandmother bound her to the house." Claire's voice broke. "Bound her?" "Through time," Agnes whispered. "But time doesn't like being used." Back at the estate, Claire rifled through the archives in her grandmother's study. She found a weathered lockbox that required the clock key to open. Inside was a birth certificate. Claire Evelyn Whitmore. Date of birth, May 6, 1964. Place, Whitmore Estate, Devon. Mother, Eleanor Whitmore. Father, unknown. Claire's hands shook. Her birthday was October 17, 1964. Born in Boston. This wasn't her. This was the other Claire. Beneath the certificate was a single line, written in Eleanor's spidery script. "One child of time, one child of choice. The clock must choose." And then Claire remembered something her husband once said in a dreamlike state. "You were never the first, but you must be the last." The estate chapel hadn't been used in decades. Claire unlocked it with a rusted key and stepped into the dust-caked silence. There were 3 caskets in the crypt. 2 were labeled Eleanor Whitmore, 1915 to 1992, and Joseph Whitmore, 1909 to 1956. The third had no name. Claire pried it open. Inside was a perfectly preserved porcelain doll dressed in a replica of her childhood dress. Clutched in its arms, a small music box. She wound it. It played the lullaby her mother used to hum, the one Claire had never told anyone about. And then, from behind the altar, she heard humming. A child's voice, softly singing along. Claire turned and saw a girl in the shadows, holding a clock pendant to her lips. "You forgot me. So I waited. And now, it's your turn." Claire backed away from the little girl in the chapel. But the girl didn't move. She simply tilted her head and whispered, "Watch." The stained glass window behind the altar shimmered. It was no longer a scene of angels. It showed a reflection of the present, and then morphed into a vision of the past. Claire saw her grandmother, Eleanor, dragging a screaming girl into the cellar, clutching the very same clock pendant. She saw Eleanor sobbing by the fireplace, the portrait of Claire too, burning behind her. Then she saw something that turned her cold. A baby in the arms of Maud, being handed to a strange American couple. Her parents. Claire confronted Maud in the kitchen, trembling. "You knew," Claire said, placing the broken watch and birth certificate on the table. Maud's hands shook as she poured tea. "Yes." Claire's voice cracked. "I'm not Eleanor's granddaughter. I'm her second chance." Maud sat down. "Your mother was a distant cousin. Eleanor took you in after the fire, changed your name. She said the house needed a true Claire." "What happened to the first one?" Maud looked away. The clock rejected her. She tried to control it. She opened doors that should have stayed closed. Claire whispered, "Is she dead?" Maud shook her head. "Worse. She's lost in time." Claire climbed into the West Tower, a place sealed off for decades. At its heart, the original clockwork room. There, she found an old journal wrapped in oilskin. It belonged to Augustus Whitmore, her great-great-grandfather, a clockmaker rumored to dabble in the occult. The final pages chilled her. Time cannot be owned. It can only be borrowed. I built the pendulum to hold the fragments together, but when Eleanor awakened the girl, the cycle began anew. Claire turned the page and saw a diagram. Two identical girls, one labeled Host and the other Echo. Beneath it, only one Claire can remain anchored in this world. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Claire woke to a strange vibration under the floorboards. The clock was ticking backward. She stumbled into the hall. The walls were bleeding old memories. Wartime voices echoed. Her mother calling her name. Eleanor's screams. She followed the echo to the attic. There, standing in a beam of moonlight, was Claire too, older now, no longer a child. Her eyes were black voids, and time bent around her like shattered glass. I lived in the cracks between ours, she whispered. I watched you take my life. Claire whispered, I didn't know. I never asked for this. Claire too's voice turned bitter. But the house chose you. Lightning cracked outside. The clock struck 13. The rift opened, a swirling storm of broken time. Claire reached into the vortex and screamed, Take me instead. The rift pulsed. Claire too looked shocked, then sad. You'd give your soul for mine? She asked. I already have your name, Claire said. You deserve your time. The walls of the attic trembled. The entire house seemed to inhale. Then silence. Claire woke on the floor of the nursery. Sunlight streamed in. The air was warm. Maud stood in the doorway. It's done. Claire sat up. Where is she? Maud pointed to the mirror. Claire saw her reflection, and behind it, a girl in a blue dress, waving, smiling. Claire too is free, Maud said. And so are you. But as Claire turned away, the clock on the wall ticked once. Then ticked backward. Days passed with eerie calm. Claire busied herself restoring the estate, but an unease lingered, like forgotten music echoing in another room. Then, while organizing old trunks in the East Wing, she found a photo album. Inside, a black and white picture she had never seen before. Two girls, identical, standing in front of the Whitmore estate. One wore a locket, the other wore a watch. Claire stared at the picture. Her hands trembled. It was dated June 12, 1970. Claire hadn't arrived in England until 1982. And yet, there she was. Or someone who looked exactly like her. On the back of the photo. When they cross paths again, time will fold. That night, Claire heard scratching behind her bedroom wall. She thought it was mice, until the scratching became tapping. A rhythm. 3 slow. 2 quick. Then 3 slow again. Claire tapped back. The wall creaked and opened. Behind it was a hidden staircase leading into the cold dark of the servants' quarters. There she saw her, a woman in a widow's veil, face pale, whispering to the shadows. Claire approached cautiously. Who are you? The woman lifted her veil. She had Eleanor's face, but far older, eyes hollowed with centuries of time. Time punishes thieves, the woman rasped. You let her out. Now you must pay the debt. Maud took Claire to a secret chamber below the estate, the original pendulum chamber built by Augustus Whitmore. A massive copper pendulum swung slowly, slicing through candlelit air. This room balances the timelines, Maud said. When you let Claire too out, the balance shifted. Claire's voice trembled. Then why am I still here? Because the house wants something else, Maud whispered. It has one more secret to give. Maud handed her a small leather pouch. Inside, a blackened coin marked with a clock face and the words, "Turn me once." Claire turned the coin. The pendulum froze midair. And all the candles went out. Claire found herself standing in a different version of the estate. Walls decayed, time fractured, shadows moving backward. At the center of the room sat a woman cloaked in gold, her face obscured, turning a giant hourglass. Claire Evelyn Whitmore, the woman intoned. Your soul belongs to time now. You crossed a bound. Claire stepped forward. I only wanted to fix what was broken. The woman tipped the hourglass. Then fix it. Claire saw flashes: her mother's accident, her adoption, her first kiss, her husband's death, all events tumbling out of order. You may choose 1 hour to relive, the woman said. 1 hour to change everything. But what price? Claire asked. The woman looked up. You'll forget the truth. Claire sat alone in the pendulum room, the black coin in her palm, weighing her options. She could go back to the moment her parents died and save them, or go back to the night her husband collapsed and call for help in time. She could return to the day Claire too was taken and stop Eleanor. Tears streamed down her face. 1 life. 1 hour. She whispered, I choose her. The clock roared. She awoke in 1972, hidden behind the hedge of Whitmore Estate, watching Eleanor drag a child, the other Claire, toward the cellar. Claire stepped out of the shadows. No more, she said, and the clock behind her shattered. Claire stood in the garden in the past, 1972, blocking Eleanor's path as she dragged the young Claire too toward the cellar. Eleanor froze. Her eyes locked with Claire's. You, she hissed. You're not supposed to be here. I am now, Claire said, voice steady. The little girl behind Eleanor began to cry. Claire stepped forward. You're breaking time to save your legacy. But you're destroying your family. Eleanor screamed and raised her cane, but as she swung it, time fractured. Reality rippled outward. The trees froze midsway. Birds stopped midair. A rift opened between them, a tear in time, and all three were pulled into it. Claire landed on a glass floor, in a world shaped like the Whitmore Estate, but twisted, decayed, and endless. A mirror realm governed by the grand clock, a celestial machine floating above. Young Claire too stood nearby, scared and silent. Eleanor staggered to her feet. You've doomed us all, she shouted. No, Claire said. You did. When you chose power over people. A voice echoed from above, the same voice Claire heard the first night in the nursery. Time observes. Time judges. One of you must remain. Claire turned to the child. It should be her. She was stolen. The grand clock ticked slowly. Eleanor laughed bitterly. You're just a copy. A replacement. Claire knelt before the girl. Even copies can make real choices. The grand clock revealed a final choice. A single lever rose from the floor, set in crystal. A voice echoed. One must go. One must stay. One must forget. Claire stood with Eleanor on one side, Claire too on the other. She finally understood. The clock wasn't punishing them, it was offering redemption. But only through sacrifice. Eleanor lunged for the lever. Claire grabbed her. They struggled, decades of secrets, grief, and love crashing down. Eleanor screamed, she was mine. No, Claire whispered. She was herself. Claire too walked forward and gently pulled the lever down. The grand clock spun violently. Light burst from its face. The ground cracked. And then, darkness. Claire woke on the lawn of the estate, rain falling gently. Everything felt different. Lighter. The estate looked newer, no longer haunted by echoes. Maud stood on the porch, smiling softly. You did it, she said. Claire whispered, did what? But she didn't remember how she got there. Only that she was safe. That the house was peaceful. That she was home. In her pocket was a locket. Inside, a picture of her as a child, standing beside another girl, identical to her, both smiling in the sun. No name. No date. Just the engraved words. We chose each other. Years passed. Claire remained the quiet caretaker of the Whitmore estate. She opened it to the public, claiming it as a historical site. Visitors came from around the world to see the house that kept time. One evening, while dusting the old pendulum chamber, Claire noticed the great clock ticking again, not forward, not backward, but freely. She smiled. As she left the room, a child visiting with her family paused at the doorway, staring at the clock. She's in there, the little girl whispered. Who? Her mother asked. The girl pointed to the pendulum. The girl with the same face. Claire stood at the top of the stairs, listening and smiling. Because now they both had time. Thanks for watching. If you're hooked on gripping stories like this, Be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales. Your support means the world to us. With love and gratitude, I invite you to join our community for more captivating content. Subscribe now for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Thank you.